Which way does it go tomorrow? If you had to make a call right now, what do you think's going to happen?
Thanks for having me on. So our board has recommended a 4 vote for the Frontier transaction, and to be clear, the vote tomorrow is whether or not we do a deal with Frontier or we do nothing. So there is no proxy vote with regard to a JetBlue transaction. Our shareholders are voting on whether or not they want us to stand alone or they want us to do a deal with Frontier. And we believe the deal with Frontier is an extremely accretive transaction. Not only is it do the things that Barry outlined in his interview with you, but more importantly, our shareholders get equity in that deal, and they get to participate in the upside of that transaction and the return of the airline business as we get past the pandemic. So our view is that on a pro forma basis, that transaction's worth north of $50, which is well in excess of where we trade today and well in excess of what JetBlue is offering. So we think it's a very, very good deal for our shareholders.
Okay, I hear what you're saying about the fact there is no proxy JetBlue vote tomorrow, but do you really think that if the Frontier bid is voted down tomorrow that you will remain a standalone entity?
Well, I'm focused more on getting us to a yes with Frontier. I do honestly believe that is the right transaction for our shareholders for the reasons I just outlined. Not only is it good for our shareholders, it's really good for the consuming public. There is an opportunity here for the combined business to more effectively compete with the larger airlines here in the United States. We believe, based on third-party analysis, we can deliver north of $1 billion annually in savings for consumers. So in this regulatory environment, we think that's a narrative that actually gets us across the goal line. In contrast to that, JetBlue is selling a story where they're gonna take seats off the airplane and raise fares, and we think that's a challenge.
The Frontier bid and the 50 you're referring to is potential. Robin's bid is 33.50, and it's a certainty. I appreciate there's regulatory issues around that, but we're going into a pretty difficult environment, Ted. A recession is possible. Why shouldn't shareholders look more at the JetBlue offer and see more certainty there?
Well, I think the reasons are some of what you just alluded to, although I would like to add some emphasis to it. We believe that the regulatory story is quite challenged and that the chance of that JetBlue transaction potentially being approved here in the United States is very low. So on a probability adjusted basis, what would happen is you would be waiting north of 2 years in a protracted legal debate with the government, probably a lawsuit. And at the end of that, you would probably not have an approved transaction, and the only thing left for our shareholders would be a reverse termination fee. And that's not the prize we're fighting for here today. What we're fighting for is a bigger, stronger business. And while there is, risk on the horizon of recession or whatever that is, this business will recover. It has been in a difficult period over the course of the pandemic, and the right place for investors to be is in the low-cost side. And so a combined Frontier and Spirit gets that done.
Ted, I'm going to pick up on what Guy was just talking about. So we had a central bank panel on for an hour and a half earlier, and basically central bankers are saying we're going to have to tamp down inflation expectations, even if that means a recession or really destroying demand. And I'm wondering how long you can sustain it. How long does the Frontier deal make sense? How much time can you handle a recession before you've lost value for shareholders?
Well, historically, ULCCs have performed relatively well in recessionary periods. In fact, that's generally the period where they outperform the market, because what you find is that people are trading down in their buying decisions and they're looking for lower cost travel. And the best people to deliver that, the best institutions to deliver that, are the low-cost, low-fare airlines. So if you look over the last 2 decades, what airlines have performed very well, regardless of the economic cycle, it's ULCCs in the United States and Europe and Asia. And so we think that for that reason, this is why this is the right bet.
You talk about the fact that investors are going to have to wait to go through the regulatory rigmarole that is likely to occur if we were to see a JetBlue takeover. Ted, to be honest, Spirit Frontier is going to face quite significant regulatory oversight as well. The Biden administration is making it very clear that any airline combination of significant size is going to elicit such scrutiny. How long do you think it would take to get your deal done? And what kind of concessions would you have to offer in order to get it across the line?
Well, we're in the midst of that regulatory review right now. The government has issued its second request, and we've responded to that request. So we're kind of going through that process. But that was all expected during our analysis early on and at the announcement period back in February. So we're sort of on schedule right now, still targeting the tail end of this year for a closing. To the extent that it is protracted, what I would tell you is that our business would continue to operate exactly the same way it's operating right now. We're a ULCC penetrating the market, continuing to grow. I wouldn't speak on behalf of Frontier, but I would expect they would do the same. I don't know if that would necessarily be true with a JetBlue transaction. I think that the operating covenants over that regulatory period would be different because we are different businesses. They are a higher cost, higher fare airline, and we're a low cost, low fare airline. And I think that would create challenges for our business and risks that are not fully appreciated by the market.
Ted, proxy advisor ISS and TIG advisors now favor the JetBlue deal, and that was a shift. And I'm wondering, do you have a sense of their conversations with shareholders that haven't made a decision yet over the Frontier deal? Are you worried they're going to sway some last-minute undecideds?
Well, we're getting close to the goal line here, so I'm not sure that I can guess. You know, a lot of our institutions will vote very late, so I think we'll be reading the tea leaves as we move ahead. So we're not quite sure where we land there, but we're still very bullish on the transaction. We've been spending a lot of time with our shareholders trying to and starting to gain some momentum here heading into the vote. But you know, we'll learn more over the next 24 hours. Obviously, we'll know by the time we head into the vote tomorrow how our shareholders are viewing the transaction. Clearly believe it's the right move, and leaning into that today.
Ted, when do the supply chain issues that the industry is facing start to ease? When do the labour shortages that are bedeviling the industry start to taper off? When does jet fuel come back down again? What is your sort of operational take on what is happening here, A, on the demand side, and B, on the supply side?
Well, demand's very strong, so we can start there. It's been a nice resurgence here heading into the peak periods, travel periods here in the U.S. The spring started it off, and now the summer we're heading into, it's very strong. Load factors are very high. People are back traveling, which is great to see. We definitely see supply restraint, supply chain issues. For the airline business, we're a very labor-intensive business, and that ends up being one of the principal issues. Is we're fighting a very low unemployment rate here in the United States, so that's still a challenge for us. Jet fuel is very high historically, and more importantly, the crack spread on it is very high, which is pushing the business as well. But over time, what's great about our business is supply demand does reset. When you have higher input costs, usually that leads to a different supply of seats, and that's how we gain pricing traction and make sure we're in balance.